Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of All For You. This will be part 17, day 34. Hizashi wanted it to be known that he was not nervous to hold Izuku. The steady hands quirk may have been the only thing keeping his hands from shaking, but that was simply because the opened front hospital gown left him cold. That was all. Hizashi didn't even believe himself at this point. It was silly that he felt this unsettled by something with a ridiculous name such as kangaroo care, but if shifting Izuku had been terrifying, he didn't even know the word for what this was. He felt like he shouldn't be here. He felt unqualified, like a fraud. He felt so wildly unprepared and unready that he was halfway tempted to back out. He felt like he was going to mess this up irreparably. Hizashi had never been good at being kind or gentle or caring. He had never been good at empathy or sympathy or love. He had never been good at being good. He had done his best with Yoichi, but, well, that hadn't turned out well for either of them. Yoichi's heart may have had a murmur, but at times it felt like Hizashi had been the one with the real heart problem, namely because much of the time it felt like he didn't have one. And while on some level he knew that none of that had anything to do with his ability to hold an infant, holding Izuku was one of his first steps to fatherhood, something he was not confident he was able to do well, especially not on his own. He couldn't help but wish Inko was here. She had always been such a natural at caring, at gentleness, at kindness. It came to her as easy as breathing, and she always had a moment or a gesture to spare for those that needed help. From the man that had just insulted her, to the child who scraped their knee, to the snail that might get dried out soon. Whereas he had to convince himself to connect to Izuku 3 days after he had been born and struggled to care about those outside his innermost family, even if he wanted to. She was so very similar to Yoichi in that way. She was so very different from him in that way. She should have been the first to hold Izuku, not him. Yet, he was the only person that could be here. So here he was, flaws and imperfections and fears and all. He let out a slow breath, tucking the hospital gown around himself a little tighter as he watched the bustle of nurses around Izuku's incubator. He could feel his unsteadiness pushing against the constraints of the steady hands quirk, trying to shake but being unable to. Soon he would be told to walk over, and would quickly transfer Izuku from the warmth of his incubator to his bare chest. Skin-to-skin contact would help Izuku regulate his temperature, so even though it left him feeling very vulnerable and exposed, that was what he would do. Soon. Quite literally any moment now. He could do this. "Ready, Midoriya-san?" Anda asked. "No." Hizashi nodded mutely, and he walked forward, the nurses clearing a small path for him. He looked down at Izuku. Izuku wriggled in place, limbs moving erratically and whining softly. He was probably cold. He could fix that. His chair was right next to him. He had an hour to hold Izuku. He just needed to... "Put your hand under his little butt." The thought still sounded like Mitsuki. Hizashi took in a slow, deep breath and started working his fingers under Izuku. Izuku whined a bit, his limbs flailing out, but Hizashi had pushed on. Reiki-san said he would be okay last time. He would be okay this time. Izuku was cold, he could fix that, and he didn't have time to hesitate. Izuku's head and little butt successively resting in his palms, Hizashi quickly leaned over and lifted Izuku to his chest. He could feel Izuku's movements against his skin. His heart was in his throat. He felt like he was going to choke on it. He stood up, shuffling to his chair as the nurses bustled around him, arranging Izuku's tubes and wires. It felt like it took an eternity to finally sit. He readjusted his grip on Izuku, on his baby, on his precious little boy to better cover him, even as blankets were draped over them. One hand still covered almost all of Izuku's body. He was barely visible underneath 2 of them. Izuku whined, still moving unhappily against his chest. Hizashi swallowed, looking up for a familiar face. Anda grinned back. "Am I doing this right?" Hizashi asked uncertainly. "You're doing great, Midoriya-san," she said, readjusting some of Izuku's tubes. "Look, he's already calmed down." Hizashi blinked and looked down. Izuku looked up, one eye opened. His world narrowed down to the tiny infant lying on his chest. The monitors, the nurses' murmurs, all faded to background noise. All Might himself could appear right in front of him, and offer one for all, and he would not give a damn. Izuku was calm, no longer whining or thrashing unhappily, his tiny hands curled into loose fists, doll-sized fingers resting gently against his skin. Izuku's tongue pushed out of his mouth a little before disappearing once again. Hisashi readjusted his grip so that he could hold on to one of those precious hands. Izuku whined. "It's okay," Hisashi whispered quickly, his heart twisting in his chest. "You're all right, Izuku. It's just me. It's just Dad." Izuku calmed again, his eye closing. Hisashi gently held one of Izuku's hands between his pointer finger and thumb. Izuku gripped back. Hisashi smiled, even as his vision blurred. There had been times that Inko would burst into tears for reasons he never understood, like when she saw a cute animal or when he proposed or at their wedding. He would get concerned, worried that something was wrong. After all, tears were typically a sign that something was wrong. She had said they were happy tears, though. Which, sure, Hisashi had heard of. He'd been alive too long not to, though he'd never understood it, just like so many other things about the heart. But he'd never experienced it. Not until now. "I love you," Hisashi whispered to his heart, his world, his everything, as happy tears dripped down his face. "I love you, Izuku." This heart was not Mama's heart. He knew Mama's heart from the warm dark. It was always there. He could feel it in his tummy. It was safe. But then he left the warm dark, and Mama left too. He didn't like not the warm dark. It was cold. It hurt. It was too much. And there was no Mama. He loved Mama. He missed Mama. There were not Mamas, but he didn't want not Mamas. He wanted Mama. He wanted Mama's heart. But this wasn't Mama's heart. It was slower. It boomed. He could feel it. He didn't know this heart. He didn't know the skin he lay against. Then it rumbled underneath him. In time with a familiar voice, it boomed louder than the heart, almost shook him, almost too much, but he relaxed. He knew that voice. That was Big Voice. Big Voice was a not Mama, but Big Voice was a lot like Mama. Big Voice made him feel safe. Big Voice made the hurt not hurt so bad. Big Voice was always there. He wanted Big Voice. He loved Big Voice. Ring, 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 ring. "Hello, this is Inko Midoriya. I'm sorry I missed your call. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." Beep. "Hello, love. You know how you always used to break into happy tears? I'd always used to say that I never really understood." A soft laugh. "Well, I do now. I'm sure that's a side you would have liked to see, given how much I used to tease you about it. A little I told you so moment for you. Well, I'm sure you can guess what did it. You were always intuitive that way. I got to hold Izuku, truly hold Izuku for the first time today. It was part of that kangaroo care thing I had mentioned a few days ago. I got to hold him for about an hour. After that, he had to go back to the incubator." Another laugh. "And let me tell you, Inko, he was not happy about that. He was sticking his arms and legs out as stiff and straight as he could, preventing the nurses from getting him into the right position. I'm surprised that his personality is shining through so early. So young, but he really is quite stubborn. I suppose he got that from the both of us." A sigh. "I know that he is small, so incredibly small. And I know that you know that too, even if... Well, anyway. But love, he looks so much smaller outside the incubator. My hand still covers almost all of his body, just my hand, Inko. He's grown, he's over 1 kilogram now, he's doing so well, but he is still so small." A pause, distantly the sounds of monitors. "I suppose the fact that he's doing so well makes him strong, in a sense, doesn't it? I've never really thought about it that way, but he is. He is so strong, Inko. I think he'll be okay." Another pause. "Oh." Tapping on the phone, a chuckle. "Mitsuki is demanding pictures, Inko. I didn't take any, I was rather busy, but I think the nurses did. I think one of the nurses bought a disposable camera and started sneaking pictures for me. I think it was Aoi. I'll have to ask her for them, so Mitsuki won't have to make true on her promise to blackmail me for them. We've been getting along better since all this has happened. I'm not particularly sure why, but it helps, having her and Masaru around. They remind me of you, and really, they've been helpful, far more helpful than I expected." Another chuckle. "She's funny, too. I know I always used to complain that she was annoying, but, well, she's grown on me. She said something when I held Katsuki for the first time, and now it just echoes in my head every time I think about picking Izuku up. I won't say it on the phone. I do still have some pride. But I don't think it'll ever leave my head. I think you would have found it funny too, though. Izuku has so many people who love him because they loved you. I wish you had gotten to see him, love. A sigh. I rather doubt I have anyone similar. My brother would have been soft for Izuku, I think, but our relationship was rocky, to say the least. I have perhaps one acquaintance, one very large and rather simple acquaintance, that might care about him because they are fond of me, but I think that's it. I wonder if maybe I should have made different choices back when I was getting into my work. A sigh. Until next time, love. Call ended. All right, listeners, this concludes day 34 of All For You. Day 35 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.